Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the this session of the Operational Services Committee on the 23rd of June. The meeting is live streamed. Now I will turn to the agenda. Do we have any public questions, Patrick? No public questions. Do we have any apologies and substitutions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Christine Ambrose-Smith and Councillor Catherine Holzman. Councillor Anna Bailey is substituting for Councillor Ambrose-Smith and Councillor Lee Denny is substituting for Councillor Holzman.
I'd like to welcome Councillor Dewey to your first Operational Services meeting. The previous meeting held on the...
So sorry, Chair, there's declarations of interest.
Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. And then we move forward to the minutes of the meeting on the 24th of March. Does anybody have any comments to make? Councillor Whelan.
On page 10 of our pack, the housing adaptations and repairs policy, I think it was me and not Councillor Alison Whelan that actually raised the future of update policies. So that is a...
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, she wasn't here.
She wasn't there. That would be a clear indication. I'll give you that. Any other comments? Councillor Inskip or Councillor Colbert. Now, you know what happened last time, Councillor Colbert, you need to go first.
Oh, thank you. Dear me. Page 7 of that meeting.
Page 11 on our agenda.
Yeah, 11
yes.
of our agenda. Yeah, it's just a typo. It says that I suggested that the figures on the
Yes.
collection of spending, it's supposed to say the collection and spending of section
Yes.
106 fund.
I spotted that one as well, and I said that doesn't make sense. So
No.
well done for picking that up.
Thank you.
Any others? Councillor Inskip?
Right. So just, well, a comment in that I'm on page 13 of the agenda pack. I haven't heard anything back from Councillor Horgan yet on the question I raised on the Anglia Revenues Partnership minutes.
I will ask him to get in touch with you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the minutes? And if so, are we happy for me to sign them as a true record at the end of this meeting once they've been amended? Yeah, perfect. Okay. On to the chairman's announcements. I have been asked to tell you all that the council has developed and shared a youth events toolkit for parishes to use that includes event management, risk plans and health and safety. Sorry, I can't read my own writing. Health and safety advice. So if you could all notify your parishes that this has been forwarded to them. So if they're organising any youth events, they've got all the information that they need. Thank you very much. Now we move on to agenda item number 6, which are the proposed changes to the planning committee consultation. And I welcome David Moren to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. So as members are aware, in December 2024, we had an initial consultation from the government about the introduction of a potential national scheme of delegation for planning committees. This has moved on a bit. So we had the Planning and Infrastructure Bill earlier on this year, which has actually introduced the powers into law, but was quite significantly lacking in detail. We now have a further consultation, which is at the back of the report, which is in your papers. And what I'm intending to do today is to run through sort of a very sort of high level sort of details that are contained with there for members to then consider and debate as to how we respond to government and to how we potentially frame ourselves going forward. So the headlines of the consultation is the potential, as I said, introduction of a national scheme of delegation. This potential scheme, from the looks of the detail within the consultation, looks to be potentially a 2-tier system. So that's tier A, which would include types of applications which must be delegated to officers in all cases, and tier B, which would include types of applications which must be delegated to officers unless the chief planner and chair of committee agree that it should go to based on what the government are describing as a gateway test. So before I go into what the tiers are, the gateway test is stated effectively at 3.10 in the report, and effectively it's suggested triage considerations for members. So that's either where the application raises an economic, social or environmental issue of significance to the local area, or where the application raises a significant planning matter having regard to the development plan. There is no detail at the moment in the consultation about where they're pitching those two, so what they mean by significant or issue of significance, or whether or not that's going to be left to us to determine at a more local level. So the way that the tiers would work is tier A, which is applications for planning permission, which would not be eligible for committee, are householders, minor commercial development, and at the moment there is no detail as to what they mean by minor commercial. Minor residential development, so that's up to 9 dwellings. Applications for reserved matter approvals, which I think probably is the largest scale of those on that list. Applications for non-material amendments, applications for the approval of conditions in relation to BNG, applications for prior approval, which, so for example, like agricultural prior notifications, application for lawful development certificates, and applications for appropriate alternative development, which if you ask me what that is, I probably couldn't answer because it's not something I've come across in the whole of my career. So tier B effectively will be all other types of applications. There is talk, and the eagle-eyed members may have noticed that there is talk about a potential new classification of medium scale housing. So that would be 9 to 50. And there's debate as to whether or not that would be included in tier A or not, depending on where you are in the country. It does refer that as to urban areas, but again, there's absolutely no detail as to what they mean by that. So it's something that we need to be cognizant of when we are making our response. I'm happy to answer any questions around the consultation. One of the things that I have mentioned in the report is potential ways that we could align ourselves going forwards. I'm not going to go into that in any great detail now, because at the moment we don't know what the system is going to be. But it's for members to have a think about how they would best like to A, be kept informed on most cases that can't go to a planning committee, and B, how they best like to be briefed, or otherwise for those cases that potentially can. Thank you.
Thank you, David. This will need a vote, so can I have a proposer for this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. I propose the recommendations as written, subject to our debate today.
Thank you, councillor Vellacott. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, I'd like to second, reserve my right.
Thank you, councillor Bailey. Now, I can see hands coiled, racing to go up. Trying to. Councillor Colbert was first, and then I think councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's not so much a question as a concern, I suppose. There are two things that concern me that have come up in what few planning meetings I've attended at this council so far. One is the fact that obviously if officers are making a decision, they have to make their decision based on the rules. They can't presumably deviate from the rules. And we had a case where it came to committee, a farmer, and they were seeking to build another dwelling according to the rules. That application should have been refused, I believe. And committee was of the view that in view of the advanced years of one of the two full-time farmers, the application to build a dwelling for an employee should be permitted. So that's one concern. And the other one is
Councillor Colbert,
sorry.
these are questions.
Yeah.
I think maybe your concerns would probably be better off in debate, because unless you have a question for David.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Do you have an actual question for David? If not, then I think your arguments are very valid, or your comments are very valid, but probably best left for the debate section, if that's
I'm perfectly
okay.
happy to do that.
Yes?
I didn't know if he was going to offer me an answer. If you see.
Oh,
what
well,
I-
yeah.
You know, sorry.
No,
I'm
sorry, I may have
I'm
interrupted you.
gladly,
Sue.
if you
If I
like.
may, Chair, we need to be very careful, first of all, about using expressions like following the rules. So for all planning decisions, everything has to go back to our
Wait,
local plan and it has to be in line with that. Members and officers are clearly able to give different weight to different matters. That's how we need to look at this. And officers' standing point, certainly on that application, was that they didn't feel that their personal circumstances overweighed the harm. Members looked at it and came to, as they are absolutely able to do so,
Yeah.
came to a different view. Now, obviously, clearly, I think where would that come under this consultation? I believe it's likely to have been a tier A. So again, yes, that's difficult. But I think the problem is obviously clearly officers are guided to make decisions in certain way. Members do have a bit of leeway. And as I will say to every member that's been in this room and have been on the planning training, you're absolutely able to give things different weight and to give things different considerations to officers. That's absolutely right and proper. Sometimes though, officers tend to take a slightly more, I say formulaic, but I think that's probably a wrong way of doing it, is they have a slightly more bigger picture way of looking at the rules, and sometimes for lots of reasons, because obviously the amount of applications that we deal with may give less weight sometimes to personal circumstances. Does that help, Christine? I know clearly it doesn't help with regards to what the consultation is saying, but more about how and what you're able to do.
Well, yes, I suppose the question is are we in a position to respond to the consultation, suggesting that members should have a right to call in applications if they feel it would be beneficial?
That's what we're hoping. That's what this process is about, Christine, is so that I think a lot of us sitting around here today feel that our local voice is being squashed. That's my personal feeling, is that the local government is being utterly silenced, and these kind of things that the government are choosing to bring in is taking away our ability as representatives of our wards to be able to represent the people that elected us effectively. Sorry, I'm sort of councillor. Have you got another question, or is?
Well, it was along the same vein, really.
Save that for the debate,
Yeah.
Christy. Save that. Councillor Brown.
You want me to stick just to questions? at this
Just
stage?
questions for David now at the moment,
Yeah.
please.
Right, just a couple of straight questions then I'll come back in the debate. David, I couldn't work out where, because we're getting a lot of applications for solar farms around my neck of the woods, and I couldn't work out where they fit. So renewable energy applications, whether that be solar farms or battery storage. And the second straight question is, who has the final say if the planning officer and the chair of the committee can't mutually agree on an application?
The first question, and I think is a really good question. The second one is potentially damaging to myself, so I've got to be very careful how I answer that one. The first question, the devil's going to be in the detail, is the honest answer. It could, depending on the size of it, fit under minor commercial development, depending on how they frame that. Logic would tell you, or I'd certainly hope that it doesn't. I'd certainly hope that it fits within tier B. But what I've put in the report is the sum total of the detail that we have at present. And I think that's a very important consideration for members to have. Certainly, one of the things I think for me as an officer, I'm uncomfortable about is the lack of detail of understanding what I say signing up to, but I think members will understand what I mean here, what either we'll be having to adhere to or not. And with a lot of these things, the detail is going to be what's really important here as to what is going to be what are those things which are locally important. And I completely agree, solar and all those energy related developments, which we have a plethora of at the moment, are certainly things which, for me, are those sorts of cases which, as a most senior planning officer here, I'm quite like from going through planning committee, because they are quite contentious and they are the sort of thing that can potentially leave officers exposed. Which brings me on to the second point about how will the system works if myself and the chair have to agree. Historically, I'll use an example of the authority I was at last time. We had a review panel where such cases were debated before they went in, and that was with myself, the chair, and a legal person, and we went through them. And there, if we were in disagreement, the chair had the casting vote. Was the way I dealt with it, because in that instance, I think it's very difficult as an officer. You don't want to be as an officer being put in that position where you're disagreeing with your elected members. And that's certainly something I think, depending on the detail of what comes out in the details of the actual legislation, something that we would need to consider at a local level as to how we resolve those sorts of disputes, because clearly we don't want to have any sort of conflict as we're working forward.
Christine Whelan, sorry, Councillor Whelan.
Do you feel that, in your opinion, that this will cause more work for the officers or less work for the officers going forward if this comes in, as it seems like it will be railroaded in anyway? But what's your opinion on that?
So for the smaller application types, I would say less work because it gives them certainty. So the things that are in tier A, purely operationally, we will know they can't go to planning committee. We will know that we can safely make a decision basically once we get the consultee responses back, et cetera, et cetera. So as far as sort of processing goes, that's less work. It's going to depend on the detail with regards to the other stuff, because we don't know what the side effects is going to be. We don't know, is that going to bring more things within? Is it going to be more generous than our current scheme of delegation? Is it going to be less generous? Is it going to encourage more councillors to want to call stuff in or less? So hard to say. When something goes to committee, generally, the reports are longer. They have more detail in them because they're in a sort of a wider public purview. So there's more people looking at them and things like that. So generally, yes, there is a bit more work, and obviously there's work then creating the slides and all of that for committee. Beneficial work as well needing to be done, but slightly more. Is it going to be significant to our overall running of a department? Probably not. So would I be overly concerned by the additional work? No, I think it'd be balanced out.
Thank you, David. Does anybody, Councillor Trapp? Oh, and Councillor Goodall. Who was first? I'm allowed to be gentlemen. Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you're not ignoring me. Thank you for your introduction. I was looking at page 25 of the report. I mean, that is the whatever introduction. The first paragraph there, it says planning is principally local. It says what I think is the right, everything almost correct, except for not revisiting the same decisions. I don't think we've ever in planning committee have actually revisited the same decisions. But I don't see how this triage, this sort of tier A, TB, is actually going to fulfill this. That, you know, I don't see it. And the comments that what I've been in planning committee now for 6 years, I'm quite a young person there. And I think the cases that have been brought up to planning committee deserve to be brought up to planning committee because there was local contention. So, David, do you think I'm making no. Do you think there's a disagreement between what it says in this introduction and the means by which they want to affect it?
I have to be careful what I say here. I think the danger is always when you are reducing the ability for things to be heard in a public forum, then the local voice becomes diluted. I think what they were trying to say with regards to revisiting is around this point as to why they've put reserved matters into tier A. So I think they're basically trying to say, and I'm not necessarily in agreement with this, but what they're trying to say is, if it's an allocated site or something that's gone through your local plan and that you're comfortable with it and you've granted it an outline, leave the detail to officers. I think that's what they're kind of saying is don't keep revisiting the site by every single layer of a planning application needing to go for a planning committee. However, again, that does take away the local flavour of things because quite often, as I've mentioned earlier, the devil's in the detail, and sometimes members are able to get things as officers. We just don't have that policy justification to be able to do so. However, as a sort of, I say a fillip, but you'll know what I mean, as a way of getting that community support, members can justifiably sort of gently guide an applicant towards it. So does that answer your question, Councillor Trapp? Basically what I'm trying to say is any reduction of that sort of local stuff is clearly in the opposite direction of what we're talking about there. I understand what they're trying to do, But how they do it is going to be, in my view, tricky.
Councillor Goodell.
Thank you, Chair. David, my point is on the minor residential development, up to 9 dwellings. That's okay when you're in a town or a city, but what about out in the country? Surely 9 dwellings is not minor. And especially in a small village as well, surely that should come up to tier B then, for debate.
I think it needs nuance, is my view on this. 9 dwellings on the edge of, or in a village, inside the village confines, you could possibly say is fine in some occasions, and sometimes isn't fine. However, 9 dwellings in the open countryside, for example, as an exception site, which we get quite a few of on the edge of our village, I would be thinking to myself, well, actually, that's likely to be quite locally contentious and potentially would be, not all of them, because as we all know, some of them are absolutely fine, some of them create a large amount of interest in. So I think it lacks nuance, is the honest answer to that. And that's probably its biggest danger as an officer.
Yeah, and the second one is, what's to stop a large building company then on buying a plot of land and then putting in planning for 50 houses, they're built, then come back for another 50, then another 50 on the same area, and chopping it up and coming back and abusing the system?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. It's a simple point. Under affordable housing rules and things like that, when you're looking at when you calculate your quantum of affordable housing, the legislation does take that into account. So you can't build, I think it's 19, and then suddenly build another 19 and then get away with not doing affordable housing, for example, because you've hit the trigger. Now, at the moment, we haven't got that level of detail, so we don't know. So we don't know if they could do 9 and then another 9, for example. I'd argue that could be it could be equally arguable if that's actually one development, and therefore would trigger it. But I'd need to see exactly how it's worded.
Do we have any further questions for David before we move to the debate? I'm going to duck here because I'm going to say who wants to speak on this matter. Lucius, if you want to kick off, and then we'll move to Councillor Brown, Councillor Inskip, Councillor Colbert obviously has something to say. Councillor Trapp? Waft away.
I'm sure we'll all have a go at
I'm
this
sure we'll have to speak.
This one's a
Yeah.
pretty contentious one, but so in our response, I'm just going to go through my ideas as they've come to me. I think we should wholly disagree with the government's approach. I don't know that it'll make any difference, but I think we should. I think it's really nice we've got alignment here. We're using expertise on both sides, which is fantastic. My view is the benefit of the current system of call-in is 2 things. It takes the really contentious applications out of the final accountability of officers who can't answer the public back. So that's the first thing. But also, I think enabling a change in the method of decision is quite important from a member perspective. So you're not just, if a particularly small application, maybe an insignificant application as the law sees it, is particularly contentious in an area, it's more open, it's more accountable. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room will have called in an application that's like that. Which is also why I disagree with the tiering system, because tier A applications, as we will all well know, can often be massively contentious. And I think the only one I've called in is Wycombe battery storage, and that would probably be a tier A application, and it's massively disruptive to the entire community. So I don't know. Part of the questions that the government are asking are, should there be a method to bring tier A to get to committee in exceptional circumstances? I hate that phrase, because what's an exceptional circumstance? But I would suggest extreme local interest is an exceptional circumstance for the method of decision, not for as a planning reason for refusing or approving, but for bringing it into public. We need much more clarity about what is supposed to be in what tier. This has really annoyed me, and it's why tiers are a bad idea, because basically very few applications get called in at this council anyway. So what we're talking about here, what is eligible for call in through that triage process and what is not, and that's really annoying. And like Councillor Goodell said, 9 to 50 houses, that's not much in Ely, but what would they think in Wardy Hill or Wycombe? So I think later down the line, I appreciate we're only sort of doing the consultation bit now. We'll have the triaging documents later if that's what happens. I think we should think about a percentage increase criterion or something like that for the particular area that an application comes in. I know that's crude, but the problem is, one house can be equally disruptive as can sort of non-householder applications as well. So something like that maybe. The gateway test, in my view, obviously needs to include local member representation as best we can, i.e. members who are identifying a significant social impact or whatever it is. I think that should be a seriously considered factor in that discussion that the chair of planning and the chief planner have to decide the method of decision. I wondered about, and we talked about this in our sort of preamble, the idea that members could be notified through an automated system once the consultation process has closed on a particular application. And I think that would be beneficial because before this new law passes, that's the perfect point to decide whether to call an application in or not. And I think that's probably what most of us have done. It's wait for the consultation responses to come back, look through them, make a decision about how best to decide it. But then if this new law passes exactly as it's written at the moment, that's also the best point to register an input to that triaging process for the Tier B applications. So you could say for them to consider that there's a serious social impact identified by the local member. And I think we should really place an emphasis on that and work that in as best we can. I think that's a good idea mostly as well because it doesn't impact officer workload too much. It could be digitalised perhaps. That would be something I'd like to look at. And obviously the triage process is something that will come back to us. So this is definitely not the last time we'll discuss this. But I think what David said was quite important. Whatever we decide to do locally, I think members have got to kind of have the decision about, because it's not deciding the planning application, it's deciding the method by which it will be decided. So I think members should take the lead on that as best as possible, especially if there's really strong local interest, because I think that is a valid reason to change the method of decision. The final thing I would say is the consultation also talks about methods of member training for planning, whether it should be national or locally delivered. Massively for me, locally delivered, because they're going to be huge discrepancies by local authority area about, even just asking questions and things. So I think that by necessity needs to be local. So overall image, I think we need to disagree with pretty much everything that's being written, fight for the right to call in as we have at the moment, and hopefully they'll keep it in some fashion. But if not, we need to have a strong local triaging document for those Tier B applications where we do still have a say. So that's my piece. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you, Councillor Vellacott. Who else would like to speak? Councillor Brown, Councillor Inskip.
Thanks, Chair. I'll keep this brief. I hope we would all agree that as far as Tier A is concerned, reserved matter applications, they shouldn't all be in Tier A. People sitting around this table will be well aware of ones that have gone to planning committee where we've actually refused a reserved matters application. They've come back vastly improved.
Yes.
Thinking about one in Burwell in particular.
Yes, absolutely.
So hopefully we could all agree that our response should reflect that. And just a couple of, one other thing on keeping members appraised of things. All the years I've been on this council and on planning committee, I have asked time after time after time, can't we be informed of the outcome of applications? We all get via the weekly list what's come in, but we don't get told what the results were unless we go looking for it.
Yeah.
Which,
Totally.
and I can't understand why that hasn't happened in the past. And finally, just on a point of clarity, hopefully not stealing other people's thunder, but it should be the lead member for planning for the Liberal Democrats and Independent group, not just the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Inskip.
I think I'm largely going to agree with what has already been said, but which I think we're all in. I think agreeing a lot in terms of the arguments we're putting forward. I do think it's going to be important that we do put forward a strong and well-argued case, because I suspect we're not the only council who's got and raising these concerns. And it may be that the government doesn't take notice, but I think the more councils that put in well-argued responses as to why this approach isn't going to work, or the problems with this approach, the more chance there is that the government ministers will at least give some consideration to changing what they're doing. Because I think, as we've said, that the scheme of development, it's very prescriptive, particularly the tiering, and very wide ranging, and removes the ability for the planning committee to consider a lot of applications that they currently do. And I suspect the interesting thing when we talk about some of the examples that have come up is I suspect the approach from government is they're thinking, oh, we'll make it easier for applications to go through. But for example, with the farm dwelling example that was given earlier, that was actually a case where the planning committee wanted to approve something that the officers would have rejected if we'd have just gone with the officer's report. And the other concern I think has already been mentioned is, it talks about the focus being on complex or contentious development. Now, clearly the tiers, you could argue the tiering is picking out the complex development, but it's much more difficult to pick out what are the criteria that apply to contentious development, because it isn't always the major and more complex applications. Sometimes small applications can be contentious, and it tends to be local members who are aware of those, which is why I think the process works well at the moment. As has already been said, sometimes the consideration by planning committee of reserved matters can give can result in some very beneficial changes. Taking that away just seems like a retrograde step. As we said, with the 9 houses, so my example would be Wentworth, which is about 50. It's only just over 50 houses, so nine additional ones is a pretty large development in that context. The other thing we haven't touched on, and maybe as a rural district it doesn't apply, but given the local government changes that are going through, the other thing that I have concern about is this small specialist committee for strategic planning applications. I was a couple of decades ago on a council which was large in those days, 250,000 unitary, and we actually had a more strategic planning committee that had more members on for the big applications. It was actually it was Southampton City, and for example, I remember there, anyone's been to Southampton, it's this massive West Quay development. At the time, that was a huge development, and with a lot of local interest, and I think it was really important for that lots of members were able to give oversight to that, rather than just a few looking at specialist strategic matters. The others that I remember, relocating the football stadium and building a new those sorts of things are actually, maybe. Those things, if we're in a larger unitary, there'll be those sorts of matters that come about, and I think it's important to have those more strategic matters considered by I think a larger committee rather than a smaller group. The other thing to mention, well, a couple of more things to mention around the assumption is that we have an up-to-date local plan, and we know that because of local government reorganisation, we put that off. The other thing I think just worth mentioning, which isn't really about the consultation, but one of the things that we said we could at least encourage parishes to do was to try to put neighbourhood plans in place where they hadn't got them. But as a consequence of the recent sort of spending decisions, the locality can no longer offer grants for parishes who are starting off on a neighbourhood plan process. So I think we'll see far fewer neighbourhood plans being developed, because it does cost parishes money to do that. It was much more straightforward when you could effectively cover your costs with the kind of locality grant. So I think all in all, these things are making it a real backward step in terms of how planning is determined. So yeah, just echoing a lot of the comments that have been made, and let's go in and put a strong response forward.
Thank you, Councillor Inskip. Councillor Trapp, Councillor Sharp? Councillor Sharp, do you want to round up, Anna? Yeah. Councillor Sharp, Councillor Goodell, But first, councillor Trapp. What about councillor Colbert? Do you want to throw your hat into the ring?
Confusing things.
I'm keeping you on your toes. Councillor Trapp.
No, thank you very much. Actually, I'm in agreement with Councillor Vellicott about the percentage. No, I do agree with a number of things that you say. As you say, in Wentworth, 9 houses makes a big difference. Wesley Waterless, 9 houses would be overpowering. So I think that is something that is depending on where it is sited. Actually, Ely, 9 houses is, sorry. Tanya, sorry about that. The other thing I wanted to mention was, and this is, I think, Councillor Inskip touched upon, is the role of parish councils here. That we actually consider what parish councils. I don't know what will happen in the future, and the neighbourhood plans. A number of times, actually, I felt on planning committee the officer has not considered the neighbourhood plan. And we have actually, the committee, as a sense, has considered and said, no, this is against the neighbourhood plan. I think those are quite important things. I find that when it says requiring separate smaller committees, there's more professional consideration. Well, I don't think a smaller committee does mean more professionalism. A larger committee actually has more professionalism, to my mind. Anyway, I do have a very positive example. I know Councillor Colbert probably have one, but there was one time when I had to bring in something because it was a Plan Q conversion. They were told, the Plan Q was told to put in 1 meter deep foundations. They tried to put them in, the whole thing blew over. The foundations were only 2 bricks worth. So we put in a plan, which was a planning application, which was exactly the same as it was. It was refused by officers because it was no longer, it was out in the countryside. But the planning committee very wisely actually accepted it and said, yeah, go ahead. And what we've got now is a very good building, looking exactly the same as it would have been had a Plan Q gone through. And I think that's one example where local knowledge is very important, and actually consideration by a committee. The officers had to refuse it. I mean, there was nothing, they could do nothing else but. So I think, all in all, I think we are wrong, in fact. We should be actually knocking this on the head and saying local things are very important.
Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I find this whole report actually a knee-jerk reaction to the government setting itself a target that it cannot reach. 1.5 million houses to be built. That's over 30,000 a week, to be finished. So this is just so we can't put any stoppers or slow the process down, which is wrong. And also, coming up to the training part, all members will have to do the training. Does this include the Secretary of State before he organises any more solar farms or nuclear power stations? Just a question.
Thank you, Goodall. Very well observed. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I wish I'd thought of that one. Yeah, and I'm going to touch on that. I'm looking at paragraph 1 on page 25, and it talks about local activity and decisions shaped by local communities. And I think that's just a glib statement by government, and it's very similar to their devolution, local government reform. They say it's devolution, it's actually the reverse. And I think this is the reverse, because I share Councillor Inskip and Councillor Trapp's concerns about the role of parish councils in terms of, the devil is in the detail, as they say. But I've got grave, most things the government are doing at the moment, I've got grave concerns about. But yeah, certainly on this, and just touching on 2 other things. One is, as David Moran quite rightly mentioned, where we go reserve matters into Tier A, then the precedent or the agreement of development's been agreed at outline stage. But I can certainly recall 2 developments in my time on this council where outline planning was for 40 nice family homes, 3 2-bedrooms, and suddenly either the site is sold or the developer puts in 20 5-bedroom executive homes, and the whole thing changed. And I'm just sort of concerned that, and that then puts a great deal of pressure, I feel, on officers, because obviously suddenly the balloon goes up from the locals because what they were a nice development on the edge of the village is suddenly something totally different. And the other thing, it's more of a question, but I don't think David would know the answer to this anyway, with no disrespect, is will this lead to more appeals, this particular process, or not? Because there's not been that local, obviously it's something, I don't think it's a question any of us can answer, but it's just another unknown.
You can only appeal against refusal. I don't think you can appeal against, you can only ask for a judicial review, I think. But Councillor Bailey, and then everybody, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're pretty much all singing from the same hymn sheet here. From where I'm standing, the committee serves a very useful function in working with officers, particularly where you've got applications which have started off as a large outline planning consent and then come back in bits and pieces over periods of time. There is the possibility of overlooking factors like making sure trees are ultimately adopted and someone's responsible for their upkeep, hedgehogs running around in safety on roads. I'm making light of it, but I am serious. I think the committee plays a very important part. I don't believe we're a set of breaks, which does seem to be what the government thinks. Thank you.
You're quite right there, Christine. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've got an excellent planning committee actually, and I over the years I have received 1 or 2 comments just from members of the public or people from other councils observing about how well our planning committee runs and how open and transparent it is. And I want to thank Councillor Vellacott because this paper's here because he brought the motion to full council. And I think it's raised awareness about what is going on, and it's heightened all of our sensitivity to it. And I think we're going to, by the sounds of it, put in a very robust response, which is going to be united across the chamber, which I think is fantastic. You know, I really think that planning is one of the most important things that we do as a council, and it is an incredibly emotive subject. It's very important for people when they've got their planning application, which matters so deeply to them. It's very important for somebody who lives next door when there's something hideous going on next door to them that they don't like the sound of, that they can, you know, have the forum to feel like that's been properly aired, properly discussed, scrutinised and really thought through. And I think that has huge value. And I feel like this government is trying to write councillors out of the system, frankly. I feel like we're an inconvenience to this government and they're trying to get rid of us in the numbers and they're trying to write us out as much as they possibly can. As Councillor Sharp said, this is the very opposite of devolution. And as Councillor Trapp said, that introduction is what we all thought is good about planning. And then it goes on to do the very opposite. It is absolutely taking the local out of local government, this is. And I feel like this idea is built for an urban environment, which is typical from government of all colours, frankly. You know, they can only think about urban environments. This doesn't relate to our district in any way. It doesn't feel right at all. Taking away the funding from parishes for neighbourhood planning, I think is a hugely retrograde step. You know, it takes away those local voices and those community idiosyncrasies that are in neighbourhood plans, which are so important to local communities. I think it's really sad. And I think we should continue to do everything we can to support parishes wanting to do neighbourhood plans. I certainly don't agree with the Tier A list, and I think we've given that a pretty good airing. And, you know, sometimes it's the real tiny applications that are the most contentious. And we all know that because as a local member, you know, your inbox goes red. And the large applications go through huge scrutiny of, you know, and expertise from officers over many, many years to come forward. They are not the ones that we end up sitting, having a discussion and an argument with 100 people in the room over. They're not those. They really aren't. It's all about context, this. And reserve matter approvals. I can think of many examples where a reserve matter application has come back to this chamber and gone away way better as a result. I mean, I think recently, if that ridiculous, the idea of an application where highways on in Streatham on the wrong side of the A10, highways didn't think it was or didn't seem to require a crossing for, 84 new residents of 84 new houses, whatever it was. And planning committee said, hang on a minute. And the developer said, yeah, all right, we'll put a crossing in. And we got a crossing. There's hopefully going to be no squashed bodies on the A10. It's that sort of thing where, our common sense view about things makes a massive difference. And we often get a better application as a result. My view here is that actually all our councillors use the call-in power incredibly responsibly. That's right there in the figures, 2% of applications coming here. And somebody else has got something to say about it. I'm sorry I'm boring you, Councillor Trapp. I'm nearly done. So I do worry that this will cause huge, I'm ignoring that amber light now. I do worry that this will cause pressure in the system and, depending on whatever this gateway thing looks like locally, could put serious pressure onto our planning officers where one of the politicians, has got really strong view about something. And I think that's not good. That's a regret. And when that pressure comes, it's a thing that comes to planning committee and that sorts it out, and that takes away that pressure. And I think it will lead to a lack of transparency in decision making, because when you've got a very contentious application, the fact that everybody can turn up, see it all being discussed and argued out is enormously valuable. And at least even if they end up on the wrong side of the argument, they can see that it was really carefully considered instead of just one officer writing it up and making that decision. So and third parties do not have the right of appeal. The protection is there for the applicant because they can appeal a decision and have it a decision reviewed elsewhere. Third parties don't have that right. They do in Southern Ireland, but not here. And I think that really matters. So just really quickly on some of the questions in the actual consultation, I think we're all agreed that individual members should absolutely have the right to call in applications. They're trying to dictate to us the size of planning committees. I cannot tell you how ridiculous that feels. Councils are all different shapes and sizes, despite what the government's trying to do to us, and it's nonsense. And actually, the last thing I want to say about the flavour of our response as well is that actually I don't agree to this national certification scheme, and I don't agree with professionalising councillors becoming expert planners. That's what we've got our planning team for. And in fact, there's enormous value in councillors just being of the people and lay people and coming from a different perspective with all their experiences in life and their knowledge of their local community and offering a different view. And sometimes that is not about planning conditions, and planning committees know perfectly well that they need to put up planning conditions if they're going to refuse or accept an application. They know that, and that's always done, and we're good at doing that here. But sometimes points come out at committee where lay people are saying something for different reasons, and that really matters. Sorry, I've taken up too much time. I feel very passionate about this subject, and I think we all do.
I think we all do. Thank you very much for all your comments. I would just like to say something in summary. They're trying to fix something that isn't broken. It's not broken, not in this district. It's fine. It works really well. It may not be working very well everywhere else, but it's working here. So please leave us alone. Leave us to get on with it. We're doing a good job. Just leave us alone. It's kind of what I want to say to the government. So, right, we'll now move to the vote. So all those in favour? Thank you, everybody. Really useful and instructive item. We now move on to item 7 and welcome Kat to the chair. Nice to see you, Kat. Thank you, David. And this is the Q4 24-25 performance report for waste and street cleansing services. Over to you, Kat.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, members. You have before you, the Q4 performance for the waste and street cleansing services, covering the period of January to March, and is for the committee to note, please. Just to try and clear up something before I start, within this, the performance tables you'll see on pages 45 to 47, you'll notice hopefully a symbol that looks like a backwards U with a tail. I understood this to be a mathematical symbol for average or the mean. I was just trying to find a way to state it was an average for the quarter, because the figure is described in the table as a monthly rather than a quarterly number. However, after a bit of feedback, I accept this might not be the best way, and I'll change it for the next committee. Pardon? Yeah, apparently, but thank you. Moving on to the performance itself, I'm really pleased to report that as we ended the financial year, ECSS's recorded performance was much improved from the year before. Just to pick out a couple of things from the report, if you turn to page 53, on the left you have the number of missed collections. The blue line is last year, orange is this year, and as you can see, there's a positive downward trend. Whilst missed collections are never celebrated, and certainly when you deal with individual issues every week, it feels quite negative, it's always helpful to put this into context at year end, when we look at the yearly totals. Out of nearly 4.5 million bins and bags due to be emptied and collected in those 12 months, the team at ECSS missed just 2,500, which equates to a right first time rate of 99.995%. The introduction of the in-cab digital system, giving crews clear and real-time information whilst in that road, combined with a deeper analysis of those missed collections that were missed, has helped achieve this. If you turn over the page to page 54, Street Scene team have ensured that the litter picking work they do has kept those scheduled roads clean, with an overachievement of the number of roads considered an A grade versus the target of 95%. I just thought I'd mention here as well that ECSS, through a specialist contractor, have recently completed litter picking the A10 around Littleport and parts of the A14 and A11 within our district. ECSS have also been training their staff to be able to work safely on those rural fast roads in the district that don't have those paths, and will be carrying out more routine litter picking on those roads over the coming year. Just to finish on page 58, this shows the council's recycling performance. As usual, this is reported 1 quarter behind. So for Q3, around 50% of our recycled waste is being recycled or composted. We're on track for an annual recycling rate of around 55% once we've confirmed Q4. That mirrors last year's rate, reflects the national picture of stagnating recycle rates. However, as we all know, with our changes next year, we're very likely to see a significant improvement in that rubbish being diverted from landfill. So thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kat. Do we have any questions for Kat? Councillor Bailey, Councillor Whelan.
Thank you, Kat, and congratulations on a great report and all the work that's gone into to get to this point. Can you give us a view on why sort of like Q3 recycling rate would dip so dramatically compared with Q1? Q1 was just over 60% and Q3 went down. It's the winter period, so it's that simple. Thank you.
Councillor Whelan.
Yeah, I understand. Obviously, you've got no targets for fly tipping. Have you done anything about actually advertising the fact on how to report fly tipping? Because obviously, I hadn't recently. I had a couch that had been left at the side of the road, and first you think that somebody's going to pick it up because often things are put on Freebay or whatever, you know what I mean? But this was there like about 2 weeks, but nobody had actually reported it, and it wasn't until I'd reported it that actually something got done about it. So I'm wondering whether what's your plan for going forward for actually advertising how people can fly tip, because I'm not always sure that people are aware on how they can actually report that incidents.
Thank you. So I'll refer back to my environmental health colleagues because they deal with the enforcement side of the fly tipping. But we are part of a recap scrap it team that looks at that, and all of our vehicles, I believe, have the advertising on them, but we can certainly look at working with our colleagues at environmental health as to how we advertise that. Thank you.
Must be something about couches because there was one dumped outside Turner's that I had to report. I drove past it for 2 days and thought I might just as well report it. So I did that as well. Councillor Colbert.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Okay,
similar
Councillor
sort of subject. I find that I quite often find myself telling people who are asking on Facebook for advice about someone who'll take away their sofa, about bulky waste. I just wonder if we do anything to actually promote that we have that facility.
We don't promote the bulky waste as much as perhaps we should, and I can take that away and have a look at it.
Councillor Trapp, then Councillor Inskip.
Okay, actually, arising from those last 2 points, would it be worth putting that on the sheet that you send round saying when the which weekly collection is when? To put the information on, A, about collection, B, about fly tipping number, bang.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have another question, which is, I think I've raised it before. In terms of street cleansing, we don't seem to have any key performance indicator about how many streets have been cleansed, or length of streets, or mileage, or whatever it is. So one could have a very good average monthly clean streets graded A, but it might just in the end up be only one street which has been assiduously cleaned. So I think something about the number, because that is one thing that is of concern to residents that I do pick up.
So on the table, it does show you the number of inspections. It
But
represents the number of
is the
streets.
number of inspections indicative of the number of streets?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. If that is so, right.
Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Inskip, sorry.
Yeah, so mine was trying to understand what's happening with the education, communication and promotion, because it says in the report, the last quarter, the activity was low due to the transfer, training and transfer of responsibilities. But actually it's like the last 3 quarters were all pretty poor. What's been happening and who is now taking responsibility, and will we see more activity around that? Because I think that's, you know, pretty crucial in terms of trying to get recycling rates up and so on to really get those educational communication activities working well.
So prior to January, the outreach rested with ECSS, and there was a staff turnover, and that post was vacant. So that's why that number was quite low beforehand. We have a client team on the ECDC side, which I now sit with a recycling officer, for want of a better term, who will be responsible for outreach work. We are programming that in, especially with the new service launch that's coming up, and we've already got some events planned, and I will be sharing that with the members because I know that's come up previously that you'd like to know where they are. So we will be sharing that shortly.
Any further questions for Kat? Councillor Petticott.
Thanks, Kat. A great report as always. Just going back to the fly tipping point, obviously our KPI is within 2 working days. Is that within 2 working days of the report, or is that within 2 working days of the tip?
It's within 2 working days of it reaching ECSS, so it goes through to Environmental Health first of all for their technical officer to inspect it, which is usually pretty immediate, and then there's 2 working days for ECSS to clear it from that point.
But that's assuming it's on public land, not on private land. We're not able to clear from private land, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Kat. This report is just for noting. Are we happy to note and move on? Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item number 8, and like to welcome Nick to the hot seat and giving us the changes to our collection waste service and a project update. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. Some of you won't have heard me speak, well, none of you will have heard me speak here before, because although being here 9 months, others have already had things in train which have now fallen to me. So as you will have read, the report seeks to update you on the progress we're making with the project, which will deliver the new waste service for us from spring next year. The top line there is that we are well on track to do that. As you know, the new service will essentially provide every household with weekly food waste collections and will also, for the vast majority, replace the black bags with new black bins. In turn, that should reduce our residual waste or rubbish and increase collections of what we can recycle. Behind the scenes, that project requires procurement of waste collection vehicles and bins, a reorganisation of collection rounds, and I absolutely get the risk that members see and feel about reorganisation of collection rounds. That was drilled into me, I think, from day one, with both the leader and the chairman telling me in no uncertain terms what was expected there. A new service policy and a contract with ECSS to reflect the new changes and new ways of working. A massive communication effort, which reflecting on Councillor Inskip's comments a few moments ago, will cover a lot of the education things around contamination, particularly of dry recycling, but also in some of those other things around how we communicate better with residents to get them to report to us. And there's a significant cost. Whilst much of it has been funded by government through new burdens, our project costs at the moment are running at around £3.5 million. So there's a massive capital effort here, and there will be ongoing revenue funds which are not yet fully funded by government. So there's a big number, there's a big value, and there is a significant risk, especially reputationally for the council. Simply put, it goes to every household that we have. So the risks there for us of getting it wrong are indescribable, really. So with those in mind, we took very early on a decision to have a very rigorous project management regime around the project. I think for something like that, ultimately that's essential. You know, that approach should plot us a positive way to the launch of the new service, sequential planning, clear decision making, and positive understanding of risks, and most importantly, how we manage those. And I'll touch on a couple of those which we've come up against so far, which, although relatively simple, are actually quite important to where we get to. Excuse me. So our journey so far looks like this. We've immediately, after the council item last year, an approval, procured our new vehicles and bins. Because we're in a small marketplace with all the other authorities and few manufacturers of vehicles, we've done that early. Ours will be here by March, April. Some councils are already waiting until next November.
Wow.
That's November 26th. And certainly one in East Anglia, which will remain nameless, hoping to go live in January 27. So that's, you know, I think that's probably testament to the planning that we had around this. The development of a communication planning or a communication plan covering every stage of the project, both up to going live and thereafter. When I think if we ease off, we will quickly lose any momentum we've gained from a launch. Importantly, it's I think essential that both our residents and our members and officers are all on the same page with this. So we have a lot of comms to do there, and I think that hopefully will go well for us in the future. The service standards document and a new contract with ECSS we've talked about. I think the contract is relatively easy because it will follow on from what we have now, but with just the changes we need. But I think, again, it's essential, and the draft is in the appendix to the agenda item, that we have a clear expectation from both the council and customers about what's expected by way of what they do in behaviour terms. And as I said to start with, at the centre of all this is reorganising the collection routes. And although our colleagues from ECSS are leading very much on that because it is an operational item, myself, Isabel, Kat and others are all over that process because it's so important. We can't communicate to people what days their bins are going to be if we haven't got the round sorted. So those things are going on, but are very much ongoing. just going back to the risk management, and I think the best example is one that I referred to in the agenda item, that it was easy to just follow the government's line and go on April 1st. That would have given us 4 bank holidays in the first 8 weeks of service.
Yeah.
We've moved that to the 1st of August, 1st of June. And our first bank holiday after that is at the end of August next year, thus giving us a better run and hopefully getting public engagement a lot more easily. So that's where we are, Chair. The overview of the progress, we are on track ultimately. There's a lot to do, and I'm obviously happy to take questions about what's already been written and what might be coming over the hill.
Any questions for Nick?
Comment more than a question, but I've been learning how you turn these into questions.
You
No,
are cheeky.
So, first of all, I think I'm welcoming this report, and I think it's going to be important that we're kept updated because you know, waste collection is one of the most visible services to residents. Also, it's a real pain when it goes wrong as well to residents. It's not just it's damaging to the council, but actually it's really frustrating to residents. And I welcome the mention of robust project management. And in that vein, I've got a couple of sort of questions. So one is, so in paragraph 317, we've got a list of the key risks. I just wonder in future, I think it would be useful if, rather than just having I'm assuming you probably already have this, is to have the more detail around how you're weighting those risks and what you're doing in terms of either mitigating or trying to prevent those risks happening. Because I think that's more useful for me. If I just see a list of risks as bullet points, I don't really know which are the most important ones, which are the ones that are really under control, which are the ones that you're most worried about. Whereas, you know, those standard project management approaches where you can show that. So I think that would be beneficial. The other thing I think would be beneficial is, because it wasn't really clear from the report, whether things are on track, but that's one of the first things you said when you introduced the report. So whether we can have some idea of, let's say, the sort of milestones that you've got coming up that you need to achieve and when they need to happen for the overall plan to be on track. Because I think so both the risk and the sort of the schedule of milestones gives us a better feel as to how things are progressing. So are those sort of things you'd be able to address?
I think in simple terms, yes. I guess it depends on the amount of detail that you really want and members need, because you can imagine there is a lot of documentation here. Most of it, well, all of it is digital, but that can be reproduced here. But I think there should be no reason why we can't give you the key risks and where we are with those. I just think it's going to be a lot of work for something which, as you know, will be quite mobile in the way it works. You know, ultimately members are entitled to have as much as they want, but I just think for the benefit of this committee, you may wish to limit that to the key issues, but that's a matter, I guess, for members to decide.
Yeah, so I'm not looking for pages and pages of information. I'm looking for a summary. I'm happy to actually have an offline discussion. Just in my day job, I manage lots of project managers who have to give me reports that I can easily sort of see whether things are going right without reading through pages of information. So I think, yeah, I'm not suggesting you come up with a very long report, but just a summary that we can easily judge.
Isabel.
Yeah, if I may. So we obviously meet monthly for our project management board where all the decisions are made, and that's cross-working with ECSS. Obviously, this committee is not project managing the project, and risks are going in and out all the time. And obviously this is a 2 monthly meeting, so you're going to miss a lot of that. The risks that we're managing, mitigating and getting gone. So I suppose I would want to urge on sort of a bit more of this narrative. We can give some headline, you know, top 3 risks, give some dates and things like that, and mitigation, but you won't necessarily know what all the risks are that we're managing because they will have already been and gone since we come to the next meeting.
Yeah, I'm looking at the headlines, what are the key ones that we need to know about? And I'm assuming there's a lot of others that are under control. You don't need to tell us about, it's all being managed, but what are the key things that you can either give us confidence things are going okay, or to say you need to be aware of these things because they could trip us up.
Thank you, councillor Inskip. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. Just a strategic question. Have you, in that, your strategic planning, looked forward into the new developments that are going on around the district? And have you got enough flexibility in your staff now, or will you have to recruit?
So I think there's two parts to that. One, certainly we've taken collectively, and ECS have based their new rounds on the anticipated growth in housing, I think for the next 8 years, wasn't it? I think that was what we were given. It's certainly of that kind of magnitude. So they're looking a fairly long way into the future to give enough capacity up front to be able to deliver that. Ultimately, though, there will be a time when extra crew or extra vehicles will be required, and that's almost part of business as usual as we go forward. But certainly that's been taken into account when designing the rounds. In terms of staffing for the actual collections, then it's fit for purpose for what we're doing now. We're clearly bringing on 5 more food waste vehicles with 5 crews. So one of the risks, and going back to that risk review, I guess, one of the risks we have is that all the other councils in the area are going to also to be chasing HGV drivers for those vehicles in early 2026. And we recognise that is a risk. We're again all in the same employment pot, if you like. So there are some issues there, but yes, that has been considered.
Any other questions for Nick before I move to the debate? No, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed your first appearance here. May it not be your last. Has anybody got anything they would like to say? Councillor Bailey.
Only very briefly, just to say how good I thought the new waste collection service standards document was. It's so clear and so simple and quick to read and understand, and it says all the right things. I mean, I was delighted when I read something about putting the bins back in the place where they came from, because that is something that often comes up, and fighting for whose bin is which on the street but it really, it's spot on. I think it's absolutely brilliant and really, really well written. So thank you.
I know you're really bad, so I just respond back. I have to accept that wasn't my doing. I did have some editing rights at the end of it, as did others, but all of that work was done by Kat and Annalise, our lead for comms. So I think having our comms team embedded in the project team will very much pay benefits.
Just really want to compliment them, because I just think it's such a good document.
And of course, some of the work by the excellent Waste Review Group, Mark. We had quite a lot of input into that, I think we did. But thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything to say? I'll be happy to note and move on. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll move. Thank you very much, Nick. We'll now move on to agenda item number 9. And this is the budget outturn report. You're clearly not in. Jude. Good afternoon, Jude. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair.
Over to you.
Yep. This is the full year outturn report for the Operational Service Committee. The recommendations are for the committee to note is that 195,000 and 163 overspent for revenue budget, and 2,858,721 underspent for capital budget compared to the budget. The detailed breakdown is illustrated in the appendix 1 and 2 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Jude? Councillor Inskip?
One question. It relates to the overspend on vehicles for ECTC. And it says new vehicles have been purchased for the new schools contract that ECTC was successful in winning. So I understand that. It says these vehicles are purchased by the council funded from section 106 contributions. So what 106 contributions do we have that will allow us to do that?
I'll come back with the detail, but that's quite typical because it's to do with growth. So where we have further provision, like we bought our street cleansing market vehicle out of that. So it's, I'll come back exactly where that's coming from, because I don't know off the top of my head.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further? Oh, councillor Trapp.
Yeah, my brain must be going. I'm just looking. I'm looking
Sorry.
at page 83, the appendix 1, I believe. Or I just wasn't sure where the figures in the last column came from. They seem to be plucked out of. I don't know. I mean. No, last one. Yeah, yeah.
Content, John?
Well, I might have to speak. I might have to consider.
Do we have any further questions for Jude? No, this item is just for noting. Are we happy for us to note and move on? Or does John need to get his shoes and socks off? To count calculations. Okay, thank the Lord. Okay, so we're now, thank you very much, Jude. And now moving on to agenda item number 10, which is the a grant recommendation under the Sports Facilities Grants Unit, grants programme. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I'll bring to members a grant application to the Community Sports Facilities Programme along with a recommendation. The detail is set out in the report and the application form regarding the new paddle courts at Ely Outdoor Sports Association. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And does everybody know what paddle tennis is? Not everybody did. Yes, I know. It's a cross between squash and tennis, and very popular on the continent, I believe. Not that I've ever played it. Right, okay, well, we need a proposer for this. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Goodall. Do I have a seconder?
Have to second, Chair. Was that all right?
Thank you, Councillor Vellacott. Do we have any questions for Martin on this? No? Do we have anything that we want to talk about apart from paddle tennis and how wonderful it is?
My comment is, it sounds quite cheap, actually, for doing that.
It's only a grant, John. It's not building the whole thing.
Yeah, and I realize even 163,000 is quite cheap, actually. I think.
Okay.
Compared to a real tennis.
Well, yes, that's a different story. Okay.
I can just, in terms of in the application form, obviously EOSA have done all their works and had quotes in and got the proper companies in. So that's the cost that it will be, and obviously we can grant to support it.
Perhaps
Well, all in favour of that.
perhaps you could organise one in Reach, John. Indeed, indeed. Okay, do we need to discuss this or are we happy to vote? I'm quite happy to, we have a proposer, we have a seconder, all those in favour? Thank you very much, Martin. Good luck. And Anna would like to have a go when it comes on.
Oh, I'll pay good money.
Yes, so would I. I'll sell tickets. Okay, we believe you. We now move on to agenda item 11, Citizens Advice West Suffolk Service Level Agreement Performance Monitoring Update. Have I missed one? Oh, right, okay. This should be AA 18, not AA 14. Report number. Hi, good afternoon, Lewis. Welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
Over to you to give a performance update.
Thank you. So in January 2024, this committee agreed to award a grant of £69,498.08 to Citizens Advice West Suffolk for a service level agreement running from the 1st of April 2024 until the 31st of March 2027. Details of Citizens Advice's performance during 2024-25 can be found at Appendix 1. The document contains a table which includes their expected performance, so the targets, if you like, their actual performance, so how they performed against the targets, their reasons for any negative variance, and also what was done or what is being done by them in response to any variation. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lewis. Does anybody have any questions for Lewis about West Suffolk CAB? No, this item is just for noting, so we will note this then and move on. Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. Go on. Damn.
The comment I was going to make was actually, I think this is remarkably good sort of value for money. If we look at, you know, they estimate the value of the professional services volunteered is over £700,000 per year based on the National Citizens Advice calculations. And it's also interesting to see, although obviously, you know, more residents in the south of the district are using it. Actually, there are people all over the district, so we can see people from Sutton, Littleport, Adnam, and so on who are using the service. So I think we made the right decision back in 2024 when we gave this grant. And I think you know, it's good to see. I think it's important to have these monitoring reports, but it's good to see that they're performing well and providing a really good service.
Thank you, Councillor Inskip. Councillor Trapp and then Councillor Sharp.
Make a very similar comment. I thought over 1/3 would have come from, would have been to the Ely Citizens Advice Bureau of that. So that's quite a significant number that are going there. And I think it is very good value for money. I'm just trying to work it out, but it's something like 100, not much more per person than about 200,000 per person from the grant, which is I think is remarkably good value, particularly since one looks at the advice issues they've had, benefits and tax credits, quite a lot. There's a lot of things there that people are worried about and need help.
Thank you, Councillor Trapp. Councillor Sharp.
Just very briefly saying, as the report says, in the majority or most of the residents who picked that up are from the Wood Ditton ward, which is obviously the one I represent. So it is something that I feel was right that we gave the grant back in 2024. So very happy with that, and hopefully it's dealing with the issues, as Councillor Trapp says, it's dealing with some, you know, very benefits, debt, housing, those sort of things, which tend to be the ones that trouble residents most, or those people who need it. So very happy with that we continue that.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything further to say before we note and move on to the next agenda item? Thank you very much. So noted. So we now move, stay where you are, Lewis. So now we move on to agenda item 12, which is the Voluntary and Community Action East Cambridgeshire. I wish they could make that simpler. I know I can't even do the acronym. So if you could give us a report on the performance update, please.
Yes, certainly, Chair. So again, in January 2024, this committee agreed to award a grant of £39,530 to VCAEC for a service level agreement from the 1st of April 2024 until the 31st of March 2026. Details of VCAEC's performance during 24-25 can be found at Appendix 1. The document contains a very similar table to that of the format of the previous report. So it includes a column that sets out VCAEC's expected performance. So again, their targets. It then includes their actual performance, how they did against the targets. Then it includes VCAEC's reasons for any negative variance and what they've done or are doing in response to any variation. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any
Lewis.
questions.
Any questions for Lewis about this report? Any comments they would like to make? Councillor Bailey and then Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, I've looked quite carefully through the performance, and some of the actuals are, you know, there's quite a few that are below the target, but they are very subject to a lot of it isn't in their direct control.
Yeah.
You know, it's about the numbers walking through the door and the number of volunteers that they can recruit, etc. And, you know, huge amount of those targets are not in their direct control. So I think, you know, we do have to look at it through that lens. So overall, you know, I think they're doing a good job, and I'm pleased that they exist, and I'm pleased that they're, you know, supporting people in our community who are giving of their time. I think it's great.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment really. Obviously looking at the lack of volunteers, and we know it's not just restricted to this organisation that does a very good job. It's almost a question of how we can, I'm thinking generally now, how we can promote to try and encourage people back to, you know, especially retired people who still physically active and want to put something back into the community. Whether we can actually get something out there and publicise there is this, you know, ability for people to actually volunteer and put something back into the community.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Trapp.
Just a minor observation. We give a grant to them. I noticed one of the card desk administrators is now paid. Is the other part of the grant going towards things like telephones and office premises? I mean, where does the money go? Do you...
Thank you, Councillor Trapp. The service level agreement, it's an outcome-based service level agreement, and it doesn't set out specifically X% needs to be spent on this, or this amount of money needs to be spent on this aspect of it. It's ultimately up to VCA how they divvy out the money. For us, it's the outcomes that are important, making sure that they are providing the service to residents. But in terms of how they divvy up the money, that's down to them. Thank you.
Happy with that, John?
Well, I wasn't.
Microphone. Microphone.
We want to be telling them how much is, but just interestingly, just whether we know how much is spent on telephone, because they do have a telephone, whether it's office premises, you know, where, that's all I was interested in.
I don't think that ours are the only source of income, John. I think they have other sources of income as well. So they, you know, I don't think it's up to us to drill down into their accounts.
Okay, thank you very much.
So are we happy to know to move on?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lewis. We now move on to the annual reports from representatives on outside bodies, and I will hand over to Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. I really don't have much to add, just to say that we have had additional 4 reports from Councillor Martin Goodall and Councillor Christine Ambrose Smith. And just to note, for the outside body Citizens Advice West Suffolk, we've had a change of membership there. It was Councillor James Lay, it then passed on to you, Chair, and now it is passed on to Councillor Alan Sharp. So just to confirm that membership has changed.
Thank you, Patrick. Does anybody, I would just like to say that Councillor Sharp was down as the lead member. He wasn't. I was handed the role when James Lay left or decided he didn't want to do it any longer. And it unfortunately clashed with a very difficult time for me personally. So I couldn't attend the meetings that I wanted to. Councillor Christine Whelan.
Just to point out that I'm actually on the police and crime panel, but I was never asked to submit a report to this committee.
Okay, well, we'll make sure that's overlooked. Have you got a report to? Oh, okay, thank you, Councillor Whelan. Are we happy to note this? Oh, Councillor Inskill.
Oh, turn the microphone on. I've got a couple of questions. So one is on the Heritage Champion. I mean, this is a question to Councillor Vellacott.
144.
Yeah, you said the role needs to be formalised. So could you maybe elaborate a little bit on what the role is, what you've been doing, and what you think needs to change?
So I think it's very important that we have continued representation with Historic England, especially given that they're some of the more major planning applications, they're a consultee on as well. What I mean by formalisation is that there are no specific meetings or activities that are engaged with. I think the main role of the champion is going forward, it should be related to planning in particular, but in general promotion of conservation matters. But I think it would be nice if we had a bit more sort of formal engagement and maybe had more of a wider discussion about what that role could branch into in the future.
Happy with that? Councillor
Yeah.
Inskip?
Yeah, and I've got then a question on the Solomon District Sports Association. First of all, the report says, states the leisure and active lifestyles manager post is vacant, but we heard the report from him earlier, so that officer clearly exists. What are we doing about then trying to understand why our representatives aren't being invited to meetings of the? Because if I understand correctly, well, we haven't got a report from Councillor Bovingdon, but the report we have from Councillor Vellacott said you weren't invited to any meetings.
I'd like to address that, Chair.
Sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't receive any communication, so I don't have an external contact for the SDSA. There was one meeting we were invited to last year. Unfortunately, could not attend. But on that particular point, I think representation is still worthwhile because we've, for example, we've given the sports facilities grant to that organisation. They're massively, massively important in SOAM, but I think it would be worth, and I have engaged with Jane Webb, who's the Democratic Services Manager, to get a contact and hopefully bring members into more of those board discussions. Because I think, although it's not perhaps the most operationally essential one, I think it's still really important because it's right at the centre of one of our market towns. So I'd like to see that continue to improve as well.
So effectively, Councillor Inskip, we're asking Democratic Services to get in touch with the organisation and make sure that the invitation is extended in future. Anything else anybody would like to say before we know to move on? Thank you very much. We move then on to the forward agenda. Always exciting. That has been reissued, even more exciting. Monday, the 22nd. I'm just having a quick look to see what is different.
Basically, this was last year's.
Oh, right. Okay. I'm with you. Yes. Oh, of course it is. Dear, oh dear. Right. So that's Monday, the 22nd. We'll be all meeting again. Doesn't look like an onerous and terribly difficult meeting, but always welcome to see you all. And in which case then, if anybody got anything to say on the forward agenda, anything anybody wants to see on it? Councillor Trapp.
Oh, thank you. Budget monitoring report has been taken off the 22nd. Is that because there's not enough time for it to be completed by a week earlier?
Should be on there. Well spotted. Will be added on. Councillor Brown? It hasn't changed at all. Oh, no, it has changed. We've got it in the, yes, you've got the 22nd. Come along. It does say the 29th. Yes.
What? Yeah,
He's nodding. Sorry, Patrick.
And the reason it's on the 29th is we specifically asked for that because that clashes with the conference.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. Yes, I remember now. No, it's still
Yeah,
the
it was.
29th.
Yeah, so it should be the 29th.
It'll be the 29th because that clashes with the, yes?
Yeah.
Don't panic, your tickets are safe, you're okay.
All the way back from Bournemouth, yes.
Anything else anybody wants to say about the forward agenda? Your microphone's on, Councillor Trapp. In which case then I will bring this part of the committee to an end. Do I have somebody to move in this committee into exempt session, please? Councillor Goodell, seconder?
Happy to second.
Councillor Brown. So everybody in favour? Let's move into closed session then, please.